Have you ever stood in front of a closet packed with clothes and still thought, I have absolutely nothing to wear? Most people assume the solution is simple. Buy another shirt, a better jacket, a different pair of shoes, something newer, something more flattering, something that finally makes them feel like themselves. But have you noticed what usually happens? For a few days, you're excited. Then the excitement fades. A few weeks later, you're standing in front of the same closet, having the very same conversation with yourself. So maybe the problem isn't that you don't own enough clothes. Maybe you own too many decisions, too many pieces that only work with the right shoes, too many outfits that only feel right on a good day, too many versions of yourself hanging side by side, all asking to be chosen. And every morning, before you've even had your first cup of coffee, you're already negotiating with your own wardrobe. A few months ago, while riding a crowded train in Tokyo, I noticed something that completely changed the way I think about getting dressed. The carriage was filled with expensive suits, polished shoes, luxury handbags, and recognizable designer labels. Everyone looked like they were trying very hard to appear successful. Then I noticed one woman standing quietly near the door. She wore a simple gray linen shirt, dark trousers, a pair of plain shoes with a small scuff near the toe. Nothing looked expensive, nothing looked new. Yet, somehow, she was the person I couldn't stop looking at. Not because she looked rich, not because she looked fashionable, because she looked complete. There is a difference. Someone can wear thousands of dollars worth of clothing and still seem uncomfortable inside it. Another person can wear familiar clothes they've owned for years and appear completely at ease. The difference isn't money. It isn't style. It's something much quieter. That woman wasn't carrying fewer clothes. She was carrying fewer doubts. Later, I realized her confidence wasn't accidental. It reflected 3 Japanese ideas that most of us have never been taught. The first helps you let go of clothes that belong to an imaginary version of your life. The second uses empty space to eliminate the hidden decision fatigue waiting inside your closet every morning. And the third, the deepest one, does something the fashion industry quietly hopes you'll never discover. Because once you truly understand it, buying more stops feeling like the answer. By the end of this video, you won't just see your wardrobe differently. You'll understand why some people always look calm, polished, and effortlessly put together, without owning very much at all. And tonight, when you open your closet, you may discover that what has been weighing you down was never the number of clothes you owned. It was the number of unfinished decisions waiting behind the closet door. Most of us grow up believing a simple equation. More clothes mean more choices. More choices mean more confidence. And more confidence means a better life. It sounds perfectly logical. The problem is, it rarely works that way. Think about the last piece of clothing you couldn't stop thinking about. Maybe it was a jacket, a dress, a pair of shoes. You imagined how different you would feel wearing it. More confident, more put together, more successful. Maybe even more like the person you wanted to become. For a little while, that feeling was real. Then something happened. The excitement faded. The jacket became just another jacket. The shoes became just another pair of shoes. And before long, your attention quietly shifted to the next thing you believed would finally complete you. This isn't because you're weak. It's because that's exactly how modern consumer culture is designed to work. It doesn't just sell clothes. It sells possibility. The possibility that the next purchase might become the missing piece of your identity. But here's the strange part. The more possibilities we collect, the harder it becomes to choose. Instead of creating freedom, too many clothes often create negotiation. Every morning becomes a conversation that sounds something like this. This looks good, but only if I wear the right shoes. I love this shirt, but not with my body today. This jacket was expensive. I should wear it. I'll save this one for a special occasion. I don't even know why I bought this. None of these decisions feels big, but together, they quietly drain your attention before your day has even begun. That's why a wardrobe can be completely full and still feel strangely empty. Because the problem isn't how many pieces of clothing you own, it's how many of them you actually trust. An untrustworthy piece isn't necessarily ugly. In fact, some of the least trustworthy clothes are the most beautiful. They're the dress that only works if you lose 10 pounds. The blazer that only feels right with one specific pair of shoes. The expensive coat you bought for a lifestyle you never actually lived. The trendy shirt that never quite felt like you. Or the jeans you keep pulling at every time you sit down. Every one of those pieces asks something from you. Adjust me. Hide this. Wait until next month. Maybe someday. Maybe when. And every maybe becomes another tiny decision your brain has to carry. A full wardrobe can still be functionally empty, not because it lacks clothing, because it lacks certainty. What many of us are really buying isn't fabric. It's a temporary identity. The more professional version of ourselves, the more elegant version, the more attractive version, the more disciplined version, the version that finally seems like it has everything figured out. For a few days, that identity feels real, then life quietly returns. The clothes stay, the feeling leaves, and the search begins again. Most people don't own too many clothes. They own too many unfinished decisions. By now, you may be realizing that your wardrobe is holding far more than fabric. For many of us, it has quietly become a museum. Not a museum of fashion, a museum of old identities. Every unworn piece tells a story. Some remind us of the body we used to have. Some belong to a career we left years ago. Some still carry the memory of a relationship that ended long before the clothes wore out. Some were bought for a celebration that never happened. Some were meant for a future version of ourselves we still hope to become. And some stay simply because we remember how much we paid for them. That's why letting go can feel surprisingly emotional. Because we are rarely holding on to cotton, denim, or linen, we are holding on to a story. Sometimes the story says, "One day, I'll fit into this again." Sometimes it says, "This reminds me of who I used to be." Or perhaps, "If I let this go, maybe I'm admitting that part of my life is over." That is why decluttering often feels much harder than people expect. It isn't really about cleaning a closet. It feels like editing your own history. But here's something I've learned. Not every meaningful object has to remain an everyday object. Some clothes deserve to be remembered. Others deserve to be worn. Those are two very different jobs. I like to think of every wardrobe as holding two kinds of clothing. The first is memory clothing. These are pieces that carry emotional value. Maybe they remind you of your first job, a special trip, a loved one, or a chapter of life you'll always be grateful for. There is nothing wrong with keeping those memories, but they don't have to compete with the clothes you rely on every Tuesday morning. The second is living clothing. These are the pieces that quietly support the life you are actually living today. They fit the body you have now. They match the work you do now. They belong to your routines, your relationships, your everyday reality. Those are the clothes that deserve the easiest place to reach. If a memory is truly important, honor it. Fold it carefully. Place it in a small keepsake box. Let it become part of your story, not part of tomorrow morning's decision fatigue. Because every sentimental item left hanging among your daily clothes asks your brain the same silent question. Are we still this person? And if the answer is no, perhaps the kindest thing you can do is stop asking yourself that question every single morning. The Japanese have a beautiful idea for this. Not how to organize a wardrobe, but how to close the museum and open a life. That idea is called Danshari, and it begins with one simple question. Does this still serve the life I am living today? You do not need to wear every version of yourself you have ever been. You only need to dress the life that is happening now. The Japanese have a word for this shift, Danshari. People often describe it as decluttering. I don't think that's quite right. Decluttering is something you do to your house. Danshari is something you do to your relationship with the things you own. It's not really about creating more space. It's about deciding what deserves space in your life. The idea is surprisingly simple. 3 quiet decisions. Refuse what never needed to enter. Release what no longer serves you. And gradually loosen the emotional grip that possessions have on your identity. Notice what isn't on that list. There is nothing about buying prettier storage boxes, nothing about folding every shirt into perfect rectangles, nothing about organizing more beautifully, because organization can sometimes become a very comfortable way of postponing a decision. You can spend an entire afternoon arranging clothes without ever asking whether they belong there in the first place. Danshari asks a much more uncomfortable question. One question. One honest question. Does this still serve the life I am living today? Not the life you lived 3 years ago. Not the body you hope to have again. Not the vacation you keep imagining. Not the version of yourself you hope strangers will believe they are meeting. The life you actually wake up and live every single morning. That single question changes almost everything. Because once you answer honestly, keeping or releasing an item becomes much less emotional. To make that easier, I like using what I call the 3-way trust test. Every piece of clothing that stays in your active wardrobe should earn your trust in 3 different ways. First, body trust. Does it fit the body you have today? Can you sit comfortably? Walk naturally? Reach for something on a high shelf? Breathe without constantly adjusting your clothes? If your body spends the entire day negotiating with a garment, that garment is no longer serving you. Second, life trust. Does this piece belong to the life you actually live? Does it make sense for your work, your climate, your daily routine, your commute, your relationships? Or is it quietly waiting for a version of life that almost never happens? And finally, pairing trust. Can this piece easily work with at least 3 other items you already trust? Or does it require imaginary shoes, the perfect jacket, the perfect weather, or a future version of yourself that never seems to arrive? If every outfit begins with another purchase, it was never a complete outfit. It was a promise, and promises don't belong in an honest wardrobe. Now, some pieces are harder, not because you love wearing them, because you love what they represent. If you're unsure, don't force the decision. Create a simple 30-day quarantine box. Place uncertain items inside. Write today's date on the box. Store it somewhere outside your wardrobe. Then live your normal life. If 30 days pass and you never once think about those clothes, you've already received your answer. Sometimes we don't need more time to decide. We need distance. Distance has a quiet way of revealing what was actually supporting our lives and what was only supporting our memories. When the 30 days are over, opening that box often feels surprisingly easy. Not because the clothes changed, because you did. And that's the real purpose of Danshari, not to own less, but to carry less. What returns to your wardrobe isn't simply a smaller collection, it's an honest one. Once you've asked the honest question, does this still serve the life I'm living today? Another question naturally follows. What does my life actually look like? That sounds obvious, but most of us never stop to answer it. Instead, we build wardrobes for imaginary weeks. Weeks filled with elegant dinners, important meetings, weekend brunches, perfect vacations, special occasions that happen once or twice a year. Meanwhile, our real lives quietly look very different. Here's a simple exercise. Don't think about the next month. Don't think about the person you hope to become. Look at the last 2 weeks. How did you actually spend your time? How many hours were spent at work? Working from home? Running errands? Walking the dog? Driving your kids to school? Meeting friends? Exercising? Relaxing at home? Now, compare that picture with your wardrobe. This is what I call your lifestyle ratio. Your wardrobe should reflect the life you actually live, not the life you occasionally imagine. Imagine that 70% of your week is casual, practical, and active. But almost half of your wardrobe consists of formal dresses, structured blazers, or shoes that become uncomfortable after 20 minutes. You don't lack clothing. Your wardrobe is simply designed for someone else's calendar. And every morning, your brain has to sort through clothes that belong to a life you aren't living today. That's unnecessary work. This doesn't mean every rarely used piece should disappear. A formal suit still has a purpose. A cocktail dress still has a purpose. A winter coat still has a purpose. The question isn't whether those clothes deserve to exist. The question is whether they deserve to compete for your attention every single morning. There's a difference. Instead of treating every garment equally, create small neighborhoods inside your wardrobe. A place for work, a place for weekends, a place for exercise, a place for formal occasions, a place for seasonal clothing. Now your everyday clothes no longer have to fight for space with things you wear 3 times a year. Something interesting happens when you do this. Getting dressed stops feeling like searching. It starts feeling like recognizing. You already know where to look. You already know what fits your day. And without realizing it, you've removed dozens of tiny decisions from your morning. That isn't just organization. That's mental clarity. Your wardrobe should reflect the life recorded on your calendar, not the life advertised to you on a screen. The second Japanese idea is much quieter. In fact, most people don't even notice it. It's called ma. There isn't a perfect English translation. People often describe it as empty space. But that doesn't quite capture its meaning. Ma isn't empty because something is missing. It's empty because something important is being protected. Imagine standing in front of a traditional Japanese gate early in the morning. As the sun rises, light slowly passes through the open space in the middle. The opening isn't wasted. Without it, the light never reaches the garden beyond. That is Ma. The space itself is doing work. The same idea appears in Japanese homes, in tea rooms, in gardens, in architecture, not because the Japanese dislike owning things, but because they understand that space helps us see what matters. Your wardrobe works exactly the same way, when every hanger is pressed tightly against the next, when sweaters are stacked in unstable piles, when drawers are filled until they barely close. Your clothes begin disappearing in plain sight. Nothing has actually been lost. Yet every morning, your brain behaves as if it has. You don't just see less, you trust less. That's because clarity is difficult when everything is competing for attention. An overcrowded wardrobe doesn't simply create visual clutter, it creates mental clutter. The goal of empty space isn't to make your wardrobe look beautiful for a photograph. The goal is to make tomorrow morning easier. I like to follow one simple rule. If a piece of clothing belongs in your active wardrobe, you should never have to fight to find it. You shouldn't need to push aside 5 other hangers, dig through a pile, unfold several sweaters, or suddenly remember that your favorite shirt is hidden behind winter coats you haven't touched in months. When clothing disappears from view, it slowly disappears from your daily life as well. Visibility creates reliability. If you consistently see a garment, you're far more likely to wear it. If you never see it, your brain quietly stops considering it an option. Here's a small experiment. Tonight, open your wardrobe, then do absolutely nothing. Don't move a hanger, don't touch a drawer, just look. For 10 full seconds, notice where your eyes naturally land. Which 2 or 3 pieces immediately feel familiar and dependable? Which areas make you hesitate? Which clothes create an instant conversation in your head? Maybe this, not today. Where did that shirt go? The first group is revealing something important. Those are probably your anchor pieces. The second group is revealing something else. That's wardrobe noise. The purpose of Ma isn't to own less for the sake of owning less. It's to remove enough noise that the things supporting your life can finally be seen. Because space isn't what remains after the wardrobe is finished. Space is one of the tools that makes the wardrobe work. Now that you've made space, it's time to notice something you may have overlooked all along. Every wardrobe has its favorites. Not necessarily the newest pieces, not the most expensive, not the ones that receive the most compliments, the ones your body quietly trusts. I call these your anchor pieces. You don't have to convince yourself to wear them. You don't wait for the perfect weather. You don't save them for a better version of yourself. You simply reach for them, almost without thinking. That's an important clue. Because trust is one of the most valuable qualities a piece of clothing can earn. Think about the mornings when you're running late. You don't stand in front of your wardrobe trying to reinvent yourself. Your hand naturally reaches for something familiar, something comfortable, something dependable. That piece has already earned its place. Tonight, I'd like you to find yours. Just a few. 2 tops, 2 bottoms, 1 outer layer, 1 pair of shoes. Don't choose the pieces that look the most impressive. Choose the ones you would happily wear tomorrow morning without a second thought. Those are the foundation of your wardrobe, not because they're perfect, because they're trusted. This is where many people misunderstand the idea of a capsule wardrobe. A capsule wardrobe is not a competition to own the fewest clothes. It isn't about reaching a magical number. 25, 33, 40. Those numbers aren't what make a wardrobe peaceful. Connection is. A good capsule wardrobe is simply a collection of clothes that naturally work together and quietly support the life you actually live. Every piece should make the others easier to wear, not harder. Here's a simple test. Before deciding to keep a questionable item, build one complete outfit using only the clothes you already trust. Then ask yourself 4 honest questions. Does this piece make the outfit better? Or does it introduce another problem? Does it require buying something else before it finally works? And if everything were already clean and ready tomorrow morning, would I genuinely choose to wear this outfit? If the answer is no, the problem probably isn't the outfit, it's the piece. Imagine a small wardrobe built around trust. 3 reliable tops, 2 bottoms, 1 soft cardigan, 1 lightweight jacket, 2 pairs of comfortable shoes, a few accessories you actually enjoy wearing. That modest collection could easily create a week's worth of outfits, not because you own less, because everything belongs together. Of course, real life isn't identical for everyone. Someone living through 4 seasons, raising children, working 2 different jobs, or needing specialized clothing. may naturally build several small capsules instead of one. That's perfectly reasonable. A good capsule wardrobe is personal. It isn't a performance. The goal isn't to own fewer clothes than anyone else. The goal is to own fewer clothes that make you hesitate. The third Japanese idea may be the quietest of all, and perhaps the most misunderstood. It's called Wabi-Sabi. People often describe it as finding beauty in imperfection. That's true, but it isn't the whole story. Wabi-Sabi is also about appreciating the quiet relationship that develops between people and the things they use every day. Think back to the woman on the Tokyo train. Her gray linen shirt wasn't perfectly crisp. Her shoes carried a small scuff near the toe. Nothing about her looked brand new, yet nothing about her looked neglected either. Those marks didn't make her appear less put together. If anything, they made her seem more at ease. Because well-loved things often tell a different story than brand new ones. A familiar shirt knows how your shoulders move. The fabric has softened with time. The sleeves fall exactly where your hands expect them to. The shoes already understand the way you walk. Your body no longer has to negotiate with them. And when your clothes stop asking for your attention becomes free to notice everything else. The conversation you're having, the people around you, the world outside yourself. That quiet confidence cannot be purchased. It can only be lived. This is where Wabi-Sabi is often misunderstood. It does not mean keeping everything forever, and it certainly doesn't mean accepting neglect. There's an important difference between something that has aged beautifully and something that has simply worn out. A linen shirt that has become softer with every wash. Leather that has developed a rich, natural patina. Denim shaped by years of movement. A carefully repaired seam that continues to serve you. These are signs of a life being lived with care. Now compare that with a garment that has lost its shape. Permanent stains that cannot be removed. Shoes that no longer support your feet. Fabric so damaged that wearing it no longer feels respectful to yourself. Those things aren't expressions of Wabi-Sabi. They're reminders that every object eventually completes its purpose. Wabi-Sabi is not neglect. It is care without obsession. It reminds us that time leaves traces on everything. On wood, on stone, on clothing, on people. The goal isn't to erase every mark. The goal is to decide which marks tell the story of a life well lived. Because sometimes, the most beautiful thing about a piece of clothing is not that it still looks new. It's that it has quietly learned who you are, and perhaps so have you. The final Japanese idea is called Chisoku. It can be understood as knowing what is enough. At first, that sounds almost too simple. But in a world designed to keep us wanting more, it may be one of the hardest lessons to learn. Modern fashion doesn't just sell clothing. It quietly sells dissatisfaction, not by telling you that your shirt is bad, but by suggesting that you are not quite finished yet. Not polished enough, not successful enough, not interesting enough, not stylish enough. The message is subtle. The person you are today is almost enough. Just one more purchase. Then you'll finally feel complete. For a moment, it works. You bring the shopping bag home, you try on the new jacket, you look in the mirror, and for a few days, you feel like you've become someone slightly different. A little more confident, a little more put together, a little closer to the person you hope to be. But then, life quietly returns to normal. The jacket stays, the feeling fades, and your attention begins searching again. That's because sometimes we're not buying a garment. We're renting a new identity for an afternoon. Once you see that pattern, it becomes much harder to ignore. So before buying something new, try giving yourself a little space. Not forever, just 72 hours. During those 3 days, ask yourself 4 honest questions. First, what specific part of my life will this actually serve? Not someday, not on vacation, not if everything changes. What real moment on my calendar is waiting for this piece? Second, which 3 items I already own will naturally work with it? If you can't immediately picture them, perhaps you're buying another isolated promise instead of strengthening a working system. Third, am I filling a genuine gap or quietly creating a brand new category that will ask for even more purchases later? Because one new item often invites another, then another, until the original purchase quietly becomes the beginning of an entirely new collection. Finally, do I truly want this garment? Or do I simply want the feeling of becoming someone else for a little while? That single question has saved me from many unnecessary purchases. There's another idea people often hear about minimalism: one in, one out. It's a helpful guideline, but it isn't a law. If one category of your wardrobe already works well, replacing one item with another can keep things balanced. But don't use minimalism as an excuse to ignore a genuine need. If your only winter coat no longer keeps you warm, buy the coat. If your work shoes are falling apart, replace them. The goal isn't to prove that you can own less than everyone else. The goal is to stop buying things that are trying to solve problems. Clothing was never meant to solve, because enough is a very quiet feeling. It doesn't arrive when you've finally bought everything. It arrives when what you already own no longer makes you feel incomplete. By now, you may have noticed something surprising. Almost everything we've talked about has very little to do with buying more clothes. That's because looking polished is rarely about owning more. More often, it's about removing the small sources of friction that quietly make you look uncomfortable. People sometimes assume elegance is expensive. The Japanese often approach it differently. Elegance begins when nothing feels like it's fighting against you. Not your clothes, not your body, not your morning. If you want to look more polished without spending more money, I like to think about 4 simple qualities, not fashion rules, just quiet habits. The first is fit. The most expensive jacket in the world cannot save a poor fit. Pay attention to where the shoulders sit, whether the sleeves stop naturally, whether your trousers or skirt fall comfortably, whether the garment follows the body you have today, instead of asking your body to become someone else. Sometimes, a simple alteration creates more elegance than buying another new outfit. The second is condition. People rarely notice a designer label from across the room. They do notice clean shoes, fresh fabric, a missing button, wrinkles, loose threads. Small details quietly tell people how carefully something has been lived with. The third is coherence. Every outfit doesn't need to make 5 different statements. When colors, textures, and shapes quietly support one another, your presence feels calmer. Your clothes stop competing for attention, and the person wearing them becomes easier to see. Finally, there is composure. Perhaps the most overlooked quality of all. Wear clothes that allow you to forget you're wearing them. When you aren't constantly pulling at a sleeve, adjusting a waistband, or wondering how you look, your body naturally relaxes. People often describe that feeling as confidence. But maybe confidence isn't something we wear. Maybe it's what remains when our clothes stop interrupting us. None of this requires a shopping trip. Most of it simply requires care. Sew the loose button before it disappears. Remove the fabric pills from your favorite sweater. Steam a shirt instead of buying another one. Clean your shoes. Hang garments properly. Treat stains while they're still small. Rotate the shoes you wear most often. Store seasonal clothing where it won't compete with everyday essentials. These aren't glamorous habits, they're quiet ones. And quiet habits often create the strongest impressions. Here's something I've learned over the years. A well-cared-for $30 shirt that fits beautifully will almost always look more polished than a $300 shirt that never really belonged to its owner. Because polished isn't a price, it's a relationship. A relationship between you, your clothes, and the life you actually live. By now, you may be tempted to pull everything out of your wardrobe and start over. I'd suggest something different. Don't try to change your entire wardrobe tonight. Change your relationship with it. Big transformations rarely begin with dramatic moments. They usually begin with one small action that is easy enough to repeat. So instead of spending an entire weekend emptying your closet, let's begin with 10 quiet minutes. Tonight, I'd like you to do just 4 things. First, find 5 pieces you trust completely. Not the most expensive, not the most fashionable. The 5 pieces you would happily wear tomorrow without hesitation. Second, choose 3 items that always make you negotiate with yourself. Don't throw them away. Simply move them out of sight for now. Create a little breathing room. Third, prepare 1 complete outfit for tomorrow morning. Not because tomorrow is special, because your future self deserves 1 less decision. And finally, repair or care for 1 small detail. Sew a loose button, steam a shirt, remove fabric pills, clean your shoes. Tiny acts of care quietly change the relationship you have with your belongings. If you'd like to go a little further, try this experiment for the next 7 days. Day 1. Identify your anchor pieces. Notice which clothes already feel like trusted companions. Day 2. Observe without changing anything. Simply notice what your hands naturally reach for. Your habits often know the answer before your mind does. Day 3. Build 3 complete outfits using only trusted pieces. Don't add anything new. Work only with what already supports you. Day 4. Care for 1 favorite garment. Repair it, steam it, wash it properly, treat it like something worth keeping. Day 5. Move uncertain clothing into your 30-day box. Remember, distance often creates clarity. Day 6. Take a break from fashion. No online shopping, no scrolling clothing ads, no searching for your next purchase. Just 1 day of letting your attention become quiet. Day 7. Look back. Ask yourself 4 simple questions. Which outfit made the morning feel easiest? Which clothes never crossed your mind? What genuine gap still remains? And did having fewer visible choices make you feel calmer rather than more restricted? Here's the important part. Your first edit doesn't need to be perfect. Nothing about this experiment is permanent. You're not trying to become a minimalist overnight. You're simply collecting evidence. Evidence about what your body actually trusts. Evidence about what your life actually needs. Evidence about what quietly supports you every single day. Don't build your capsule wardrobe from fantasy. Build it from the evidence of what your body and your life have already chosen. 40 minutes ago, we started with a simple question. Have you ever stood in front of a closet full of clothes and quietly thought, I have nothing to wear? At first, it sounded like a problem about clothing. Now, perhaps you can see it was never really about clothing at all. A crowded wardrobe can hide something much heavier than fabric. It can hold old identities, unfinished decisions, future versions of ourselves we've been trying to become. And every morning, without realizing it, we ask our clothes a question they were never meant to answer. Who should I be today? That was the difference between you and the woman we met on the Tokyo train. Not her style, not her budget, not even her wardrobe. The difference was that she had already answered that question long before she opened her closet. She had quietly released the clothes that belonged to another life. She had protected enough empty space to see clearly. She trusted only the pieces that had earned their place through everyday living. She cared for them instead of endlessly replacing them. And somewhere along the way, she stopped asking every new purchase to become a better version of herself. She wasn't dressing to become someone. She was dressing as someone. Her clothes weren't performing, they were supporting, and once they had done their job, they became almost invisible. Perhaps that's what real elegance has always looked like. Not clothing that demands attention. Clothing that gives your attention back. Back to your work. Back to your conversations. Back to the people sitting across from you. Back to your own life. You don't need a larger wardrobe. You don't need fewer clothes than everyone else. You don't need to chase another aesthetic. You don't need a perfect capsule. You simply need a wardrobe that tells the truth, one that fits the body you have, supports the life you actually live, and quietly steps aside so you can live it. Tonight, before you go to bed, I'd like you to do something very small. Open your closet. Don't organize it. Don't throw anything away. Don't buy anything. Just stand there for a moment and look, not at the clothes, at the decisions. Ask yourself one gentle question. Which of these still belongs to the life I'm living today? You don't have to answer it tonight. You don't have to change everything tomorrow. Just notice. Because change rarely begins the day we empty a closet. It begins the day we finally see it clearly. And before we say goodbye, I'd love to ask you one more question. Find one piece of clothing you haven't worn in more than a year, but still can't let go of. Don't tell us the brand. Don't tell us the price. Tell us the story. Who did you believe you were going to become when you bought it? I have a feeling many of us have been keeping dreams, not clothes, on those hangers. And if you decide to try the 7-day honest wardrobe reset, come back next week. Don't tell us how many things you donated. Tell us something much more interesting. Which piece became the one you trusted so completely that you stopped thinking about your clothes altogether? Because maybe that's what we've been searching for all along. Not the perfect wardrobe, a quieter morning, a lighter mind, and a life that no longer needs clothes to tell us who we are.